Yeah, so welcome everyone. Yeah, I'm Philip Mwago from Medic. I'll be the host today. Just wanted to wish everyone Happy New Year. Excuse me. Happy New Year as we start our first call of the year. So our agenda today looks like we'll be having some updates from the CHT toolbox and a demo there as well. Then some total cost of ownership research findings that we'll get some updates from Mr. Jones and RTL support from Diana. And then we'll have a session where we'll have some question and answers, but feel free to ask any questions during or just after each presentation. We'll have a section for that. So we'll start with the CHT toolbox. Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Hello, everybody. My name's Josh Kustersteffen, and I'm a software developer here at Medic. And today I just wanted to share a bit about this side project that I've been working on called CHT Toolbox. It's a command line utility for kind of containing helper scripts that are super useful when you're doing CHT development. So both kind of core development and then also when you're just doing app development, working on configurations for a particular instance. Very useful for testing purposes and that kind of thing. The idea of CHT Toolbox is it is kind of designed to be really extensible with the ability to easily add new functionality, new kinds of scripts as needed. Basically, it came about because I got tired of writing all of these different one-off scripts to solve this problem or that problem, and I kept kind of repeating the same thing of having to, okay, how do I log into the CHT? How do I connect this together? I wanted to be able to take all of that functionality and kind of put it in one place where it would be easy to access, easy to share with people, and then super convenient just to use. It is kind of a community project, not something officially supported by Medic or anything. It is open source out there on the repos. There's a link on the screen there. And it is intended really for development, for testing purposes. It's not there for use in production really. It's not targeted at any kind of production workflows. That's what we've got CHT Comp for, is for that kind of stuff. But for anybody out there trying to do some testing loads, this should be super useful. I'm just going to run through a quick demo here showing a little bit of the functionality behind it. Hopefully you can see my terminal screen here. Shout out if you can't. But just to start off, to install it, it's just a normal Node.js project. So you can install it globally with a command like that. And then once you have it installed and running, the CHTX command is going to be your kind of entry point into the toolbox thing. You can hit the help script there and you get a whole bunch of help information. We won't go through that right now, but it's there. There's also more kind of documentation about various workflows out on the GitHub repo that you can check out and kind of sort through. But to start off kind of a little bit of a testing scenario here, first thing we want is to kind of have a CHT instance to test with. And a lot of what I'm trying to do with the toolbox is kind of eliminate having to go to 46 different places to like make things happen, to have a bunch of different scripts involved to make things happen. So one of the things that the toolbox has is similar to the Docker helper scripts that have been so useful for us. There's a command here to just spin up a CHT instance. I'm going to spin up a 4.14 instance here. And once again, similar to the Docker helper script, it's going to use the production Docker compose configuration files to do this, spinning the instance up in Docker. It's got the local IP SSL certificates. It's running locally on my Docker host. It's right now just mapping to a random port here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this port out because we'll need it later. And so we've got this instance started. It's running out here. We should be able to see it actually if we come over to the browser, none of this is super interesting though, because this is all just the same stuff you could do with the Docker helper script, but it will get us going if I type the password right. Maybe not. Medic password, there we go. But instance is running, nothing's out here. Great, that's where we want to be. Now, pause real quick. When you're running any of these kind of scripts, even like the CHT conf commands, you've got to be able to tell it which instance to target. So similar to the CHT conf stuff, you can target with just a URL flag, or you can use the CHT or the couch URL environment variable. I'm going to go ahead and just do that here so that I don't have to retype the URL all the time. But we're going to go ahead and just set that environment variable for this session, and all of our subsequent commands are going to kind of inherit that environment there. So we're targeting that test instance. And then finally, just to kind of, but before we get into a data scenario, one of the random scripts that is supported in the toolbox is this one here to just follow the active tasks. So on Couch, you've got various active tasks that can happen in the background here. Sometimes when you're doing testing or there's something hanging, it can be useful to know what's going on with your active tasks. So this script will just kind of sit here and print those to your console. You can see here, we actually have no active tasks right now, and that's because nothing is happening on the server. That's fine, that's to be expected. We're just gonna leave that running there and continue on with more commands here down below. But we should be able to watch some active task activity roll through up there. So I've got my instance. I want to do some testing. Would be useful to have some data to test with. I can go manually create that using the interface, but people who've may remember from previous Roundup demos, there's a tool called the test data generator that you can use to execute some JavaScript scripts that are able to kind of produce entire hierarchies of generated data with contacts and reports and that kind of thing. The toolbox has a basically just a thin wrapper around that. I can run the doc generate command, and then I just point it to the particular script that I want to kind of go execute, and it's going to generate, just in this case, a little bit of data and a few contacts. And if you see up here flashing through, now Couch is working on indexing that data that I just wrote. And so we should be able to see over here in the browser now a set of contact hierarchy has been added. So that's great. Moving in a little bit now to some of the utility things you can do with the toolbox. One of the, let me clear this out here. One of the things that can be useful when you're moving around a bunch of data is just to kind of get a picture of where the database is at. So the DB database ls like list command here is going to show you all of your Couch databases currently for that instance, and then just a quick picture of how many docs are in each of these. And so you can see, most important for us right now, my Medic database is out there. I got 162 docs in there right now, nice and small. But let's say we want to get a little bit more interesting. So one of the things sometimes when you're doing testing that's useful is to be able to snapshot the current state of things so that you can get back to it later. And there's several ways to achieve it, but the one way that I want to show here right off the bat is maybe I'll just make a copy of my Medic database, and then I can always get back to that later. So if I run this db create medic 1, what that's going to do is it's creating a new database out there on Couch. So if I go back over here and I check my databases, now I've got a new medic 1 down here at the bottom. There's no docs in there. I can then run a CHTX doc replicate, and I'm going to replicate everything from the Medic database over to the Medic 1 database. And this replication runs out. It's a server-side replication. It runs out on the server. And so if you're running this against a remote target, it's not going to be downloading all of the docs to your host server and then uploading them again or anything like that. It actually writes a doc to the replication database in the in the Couch instance, and then Couch is going to handle doing that whole replication process. You can see there is a slight bug here. It says it only replicated 4 docs. I think I need to fix that one. But if you come down here to the database list again, you can see Medic 1 now has 162 docs, exactly the same as Medic, which is precisely what we were going for there. So we've copied all of our docs from Medic to Medic 1. We've replicated them, though, so they're still in Medic. From here, we can kind of proceed on to do whatever kind of tests we want, however what we're trying to do, whether we're going to have users coming in for user testing or we've got some other kind of automated test loads to run against this instance, we can do that. One of the things that sometimes you run into when you've had an instance up for a while, a test instance, is a bunch of data has gotten added to it. You don't really want that data on there. You want it all to, but you don't want to like rebuild the whole instance from scratch. Maybe you didn't snapshot the data like we just did at the beginning, so you don't have an easy kind of rollback pattern. But it's too cluttered right now with random reports that you don't care about. The toolbox has a command out here for doing some purging. So in this case, chx.purge. That purge command, you can see here, I'm giving it this reports flag, and I'm telling it to purge the Medic database. There's a number of different flags you can set there to purge reports, to purge contacts of a certain type. You can set options to kind of purge different reports from within a given time frame. The main caveat being Couch's purge functionality, pretty slow. So don't be surprised if this takes a long time for a large data set. If you can, it's better to snapshot that database and then just delete and roll back kind of business here, because Couch purging is pretty slow. But a lot of times this is a good option if you've got just a little bit of data, or you don't have another option and you're willing to wait a while for your test instance to kind of think this through. If we go back over here, though, now that we've run that purge on the Medic database, we can see instead of 162 docs, we're down to just 74. All of the reports are gone, but even if we come back over here to our instance window, all of our contact hierarchy is still here. So that's super great. That was what we wanted. We can start back over adding new reports or whatever for a different set of tests. And then, so if we want to, at this point now, go back and say, okay, let's reset everything on the instance back to how it was originally. I want to have my kind of 162 documents back. It's as simple as replicating in the opposite direction. So in this case, I can do a replication from Medic 1 back into Medic, which works because I actually purged all the documents, and instead of just deleting them. The purge will completely remove every trace of the document from the server. Now, if I do this doc count check again, I can see I'm back to the 162 docs that I expect. And finally, okay, everything's all wrapped up there. The last thing maybe I want to do is remove, so CHTX DBRM, the Medic 1 database. I'm done with that. I can delete it. It's gone. And check again, no more Medic 1. Just saving a little bit of extra space can be useful once you start running into tens and dozens of gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes of test data out there. Keep everything as small as you need it to. So that's just kind of a contrived testing scenario of some of the toolbox commands, how they can be useful. A lot of the idea here is just to provide building blocks for test scripts, for whatever kind of workflows you might be running into here. Hopefully you've been able to kind of see as I've gone along that our active tasks will fire. Sometimes we can see it's going pretty quick now because I'm only running with a few docs. But of course, once you start slamming through millions of docs, those active tasks take a lot longer, and it can be really useful to watch which ones are out there running and what's going on there, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot through a few things. But most of this has kind of been focused on data and moving data around. That's where a lot of the needs we've had lately have been, but kind of hoping to just add more functionality as needed around here. One of the other random commands I'll just talk about briefly here is the ability to upgrade a CHT instance. So we deployed a CHT 14 instance. We can run this command real quick just to do an upgrade to 4.15. And once we run it, you'll see it's going to start going through the different stages here. It's going to hang here at completing a little bit because this is where it's actually doing the reboot of the Docker containers out there. So the upgrade process is going to tear down all your Docker containers and spin up the new upgraded ones. And so this takes just a second to do that. But while it's doing that, the thing I'll point out is this upgrade script is basically calling the same REST endpoints on the API server that the admin app does. So when you push the upgrade button in the admin app, it just calls back to the API server and tells it to start the upgrade. And so that's same process is happening here. You can see our active tasks failed. That was expected because our API server, our Nginx, everything went down. But the upgrade did complete successfully. So our instance now is out there running 4.15 like we wanted it to. This is kind of just a useful feature here if you're trying to script through, a upgrade test, or if you got some weird scenario where you have the CHT running in kind of a headless environment. We ran into this a while back doing some testing out on EC2, where we could SSH into the box, but it was less trivial to actually get access to the front-end app interface. And the last thing, of course, just to kind of clean everything up, we can delete our instance here, instance RM, just go delete test1, and that's going to clear everything off of the host computer here that I have. All of the data is gone. There's all the containers are gone. Everything torn down, cleaned up, and just ready to start a brand new test at the end. I think that concludes my demo. Like I said, the repo has been set up here to make this as easy to extend as possible. So new functionality, super welcome. PRs, throw them out there. Feel free to just fork the repo and hack in whatever code you want on your end. You can. It's pretty easy to just install branch versions or different fork versions across. So hopefully the kind of barrier to sharing things around is pretty low here. With that, I'm happy to take some questions right now. If people have questions, thoughts, or comments here. Otherwise, I did start a forum thread out there a couple days ago, so jump in out there or just log an issue out on the repo. Thanks, everybody.
I have one question, a
Sure.
big one. When you mentioned that this is only to be used for development, for me, it's pretty clear why everyone should do this, but I don't know, like, can you detail a little bit, like, what are the dangers if anybody is tempted? Because all of these functions, they're like really nice shortcuts to things people might want to do in production as well. Like, for example, I'm thinking about making a replica of the data, which, it's a nice shortcut. Can you give us some reasons of why this should not be used in production?
Great question. Number one reason not to use it in production is because for most of this code, I'm the only person that's looked at it. Right? We've got a specific set of code standards in the CHT community that code should be reviewed by multiple developers before being considered acceptable quality for production. I'm not saying that Toolbox, the code there, is bad quality code. I'm quite fond of it, but I'm the only one that's seen most of it. The second, maybe more important thing I would say is if you've got a particular production use case for something, I really think we should try to push that functionality into CHT Conf where it belongs. That's kind of the goal of CHT Conf, and unless somebody can disagree with me here, maybe, but I view CHT Toolbox as a great place to kind of hack around with ideas quickly, iterate quickly, come up with like useful perhaps workflows there. But if it's something that we feel like is hey, this would be great to kind of use in production, CHT Conf would be the place I would see for that to live. It can be properly reviewed there, and all that kind of stuff. The Toolbox is a better place for kind of quick scripts that are used at your own risk. I don't know if that totally answers your question, Diana. Perfect.
It does, thank you.
That being said, there are automated tests in CHT Toolbox. The goal is not to just kind of dump code and forget it out there. It's hopefully useful and stable enough to be useful, but right, it's not intended for a production workflow.
I have another question. For some of the calls, it looked like maybe it would prefer to run on a local instance, and I just wanted to clarify if all the calls, especially the Docker, the remove the instance, as well as it looks like you said it hits all the APIs for doing things like duplicating a database and what was the other one? I guess deleting the database and upgrading the instance. So if you could just clarify if all those, the full suite of calls work on a local instance or a remote instance, that you only have the URL with the login and password.
Yeah, great question. And I do try for each command and even out in the docs too to be kind of clear which goes with which, because they all don't work currently. You'd have to like pipe the Docker socket from a remote host back through if you wanted to use like the instance deploy or instance remove commands out there. Since those need direct access to a Docker host, those are going to be the ones to be most, those are going to be the ones that only work local. Pretty much everything else should work with the URL, with the authenticated URL. So whether it's messing around with the couch databases, moving documents around, replicating, even the upgrading command, that command that I used to upgrade to 4.15, that should work on a remote instance. It's not doing anything funky with Docker. It's just hitting the REST API. It's mostly just around the command. Well, it is just around the commands for creating local instances out there that the URL is not going to be used.
Cool. Thanks, Josh, and Diana and Ashley for the questions as well. Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to type them on chat. Meanwhile, we'll move on to the next part of our call today, and we have Mr. Jones presenting on TCU research findings. Welcome, Ashley.
Great, thanks, Phil. Hi, I'm Ashley Jones on the stewardship team here at Medic, and today I'm going to be talking about the total cost of ownership research findings that we've had and how that's led to some disk-based monitoring features, as well as some new features that we're going to ship at a later date that I'll touch on. So this dovetails nicely with Josh's talk, where we leveraged some of the toolbox features, the CHT toolbox features, and ultimately ended up shipping some features already that I'd like to cover. So next slide, please. So we're gonna kind of go back in time. We have some code in the upper left that I'm going to review that we ran while doing the research, and then we're gonna get to a point where we have that quote in the middle. We're closing this issue, not finishing the work, which is sort of one of the major points of this little presentation that I'm giving here, and then we'll end up on the slide from last month's CHT roundup call where Josh talked about Couch Nouveau, which we're hoping to ship soon, which will reduce the total cost of ownership. And that's what the journey is about, is covering our exploration into reducing total cost of ownership. We found that disk space, as Josh mentioned last month, is one of the primary costs incurred when hosting in AWS. So we're looking to reduce that. So let's kind of go back in time and travel along this journey to see where we ended up there and how we're going to move forward from there in the future. Next slide, please. So as we started to approach the total cost of ownership and trying to reduce the primary cost, which we found to be around disk space, we looked at Couch, and Couch had some free text views, and this is where it indexes every field in every database and allows you to search it based off of any random string. And we were wondering, maybe it wasn't as useful as we thought based off of the way Couch did free text view searches, and maybe we could delete some of the databases. We weren't sure if it was going to impact some workflows or not. And we really wanted to dive into this because we thought we could have some serious cost savings by reducing the disk space used that the free text views took. So we decided to pursue this and see what that looked like. Next slide, please. Now, as Josh mentioned, there's this open source tool, the test data generator, and what this does is it allows you to take a JavaScript script that you've written to generate data. And this was really important for us because we wanted to artificially be able to quickly throw a whole ton of data into a CHT instance and see what would change. And this is when we started to look at maybe instead of indexing every field and excluding some, maybe we could invert that logic where we could only index just a few fields and exclude a few. So with the test data generator, this allowed us to throw a ton of data into any of the branches that we had locally, and very quickly see how the data would flow. And it was really helpful for generating the data, and you can see you can generate different record types. So here we generate 14 facility visit reminders. And I just wanted to call this out. Josh has touched on it nicely in the CHT toolbox already, but this was really important for us to quickly generate data without having to manually click through all the web GUI. Next slide, please. So one of the features that Josh touched on in the CHT toolbox is the ability to monitor the disk usage. And what we were able to do is by running this repeatedly, we could generate a CSV. And so as we're testing a branch with a different free text view, or maybe testing a branch with no free text view, maybe we run compaction in there to reduce fragmentation in Couch, we could chart this over time. So we could chart how many records were in the CouchDB total and how much disk space was it taking up. And this really allowed us to very clearly quantify what is the total disk use that we're taking up and how could we measure that for dollars against the total cost of ownership reduction that we're trying to strive for. And we didn't want to kind of guess like, well, we think this maybe is a good reduction. We really wanted to know for sure. And so having these tools and being data driven, we could ensure that we were going to deliver the impact. And speaking of impact, next slide, please. we came to a point where we realized that this probably wasn't going to work. So this is a quote from issue 9293. While possible to get up to 25% disk space back, breaking workflows or only getting 5% disk space back isn't worth it. And this was a hard realization to come to, but it was an important one. If a bunch of code has been written and a bunch of engineers have spent a lot of their precious time doing something, it feels really important to ship the code. It feels like that maybe is the most important thing, but in fact, the most important thing is having an impact. So our goal for this was to reduce the total cost of ownership. And when we were looking at the workflows that folks were dependent on for using the search, we didn't have 100% telemetry on a lot of the offline search. Older versions didn't have search telemetry. Newer versions, we didn't want to expose PII for the literal search terms that folks were looking at. We felt there was a pretty good chance we might be breaking something if we altered the free text reviews or if we removed them altogether. And in a worst case scenario, we were only seeing a 5% disk space savings. So we made the hard decision that we're going to not ship this code, and it's just left there in a branch in case anyone would benefit from looking at that. All the research is out there, publicly available in terms of the disk space savings. Even when we looked at production instances and copied the snapshots in EC2 and restored them to a non-production environment that we could safely destroy and run our local branches, we were still seeing very varying amounts of disk space savings. So it really showed us that we weren't going to deliver this in an impactful way and that we needed to stop. So I just wanted to call that out, that sometimes that's a reality, and that's totally okay to come to that realization, because we can be impact driven and not just feature driven. And that's the most important thing, so that deployments gain the benefit of the code and CHWs can have a faster device because the server has more room to run a little bit more quickly. But we did actually realize that monitoring of disk space is pretty awesome. So next slide, please. We actually realized that without too much effort, we could actually ship a lot of this monitoring built in. And so right now, before 4.12, we already had the monitoring endpoint, and this spews out a ton of helpful JSON about your instance. It's all anonymously accessible because there's no PII, there's no PHI in it. And this is the exact API endpoint that CHT Watchdog uses to monitor your instance, to see what the fragmentation is, to see what the Sentinel backlog is, and all these really helpful things. So we realized that because we had done a bunch of disk-based monitoring and looking at some of the Couch APIs, there was some disk use features in there, and we could just expose those in the API endpoint for monitoring. And in 4.12, we shipped that feature. So here you see on the Medic database, there's two different numbers in bytes. There's the active number and the file number. So active is the size of the record in the database, and the file number is the size of all the records on disk. Because the records in the database take up a smaller amount and don't take up a complete disk block size, the active size is always going to be smaller than the file size. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to give a demo, and what I'm going to show is using the feature that shipped in 4.12, how if you're running Watchdog and you have 4.12, you already have all the disk use data spread across the different indexes and databases, and you can easily monitor them. There's not a visualization panel in Watchdog just yet, but with a few little clicks, you can pull that up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. to show y'all what that looks like. And Phil, if you could stop sharing. Great, thanks. All right, Josh, thumbs up if you can see that. Thank you, sir. So here we have a terminal, and I'm going to start by pulling up a CHT instance locally. I've already started it, so it's going to run pretty quickly, but instead of using the CHT toolbox, I'm going to use the Docker helper, and I'm going to go ahead and run this 412 instance here. And because it's already running, it's going to quickly start up. So I get this CHT instance here, and I can go and confirm that it's up and running, and I'm able to get data from it using Watchdog. But speaking of Watchdog, let's go over to my Watchdog terminal, and Watchdog has been configured to monitor my local instance. If you recall, that was, I have the URL right here. So the URL of the instance is this 10.454 instance, and it's in the YAML to be monitored. So if I go ahead and start this instance in the background, you can see that all the containers are running. So I went through that pretty quickly, but the point is, this is a generic CHT 412 instance. This is a non-customized CHT Watchdog instance. And with that, we get all the monitoring. So if I flip back to my browser, you may have actually seen that this is the live data coming off of my CHT instance. It's been pretty dull over there, sitting overnight, gathering data, but you can see that there's the different databases and views split up by the active and file monitoring. So the important part here is that this feature is built in and should be relatively easy to access. I ended up building this last night, and it's based off of this CHT CouchDB size bytes field, and there's a couple others, and then a quick transform to extract the DB and type and show that here so that you can see the DB and type in your graph. So that's the end of the demo. I've got one more slide. I'll stop sharing my screen and we can hop back to the presentation. Great, thanks, Phil. So there's three points that I want to kind of sum up with. During our journey, we came to the hard realization about we weren't going to finish that work. We had an interim feature that we could end up shipping, which is the addition to the CHT core to expose this monitoring endpoint, and as well that Watchdog can consume that monitoring endpoint and already is, so you get that monitoring for free. And then finally, that we're going to be pursuing Couch Nouveau as an actual way to reduce the disk usage and to reduce the total cost of ownership, which we're very excited to see. And it, I think, will not only reduce the TCO, but actually increase search performance quite a bit, both in the speed at which it indexes and returns results. All right, I think I saw a little pop-up there about any questions, but if anyone does have any questions, happy to take them or follow up here in chat. All right, I'll turn it back to Phil, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Ashley, for that great presentation. If there are no questions, we can move on to the next section on RTL support. Welcome, Diana.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Phil. Can you, I think I'm just going to share my screen while I talk a little bit about what this, about languages and RTL support. And this screen is going to be online for a little while, and maybe I'm going to play around a little bit with it. Okay, Happy New Year. I am Diana Barsan, and I am a principal software developer for Medic. And today we're going to talk about language support in the CHT and what maintaining and adding new languages involves. The CHT is built to support multiple languages, and there are two types of languages. One that is bundled with the CHT. This means that the translations are maintained that's supported by the community, and custom languages that project maintainers can add to their instances. Adding a new language to the CHT, for example, a custom language, involves a few simple steps that are documented and is done entirely through configuration. Right here, I have the admin configuration page, and this is the display languages section, and I can add a new language right here. This is not enough, like you have to add translations, and the simplest way to add a new language is through CHTconf, and I can link to the documentation to add this language in the full and correct way. After adding a language like this, it will appear when you log in the language selector and through the user settings page in web app. This is this one here. Another type of supported language is languages that come built in with the CHT. So there are a number of these languages. To add a new bundle language, involves different steps, which are a little bit more technical than the ones for adding a new custom language, but these are also documented. However, adding a new bundle language does require a new CHT core release, and after this language is added, everybody who upgrades to the version will have access to this new language. The difference between a custom language and a bundle language is that for the custom language, the project maintainer is responsible for maintaining all the translations for this language, because new translation keys are added with almost every release. And this project might have surprises with missing translations if the translation isn't maintained correctly. For most languages, either like adding the translation keys is enough to have a perfectly functional and correct application that users can interact with successfully. However, there are some exceptions. One exception that already exists and is supported by the CHT is Nepali. Nepali uses a custom calendar, which is called Bikram Sambat. So adding full support for Nepali required core UI changes in how dates and calendar UI elements are handled and displayed, so that the Bikram Sambat calendar is used throughout and the UI makes sense for the users. Bikram Sambat Nepali has been supported for many years, and we've been constantly perfecting the Bikram Sambat calendars, and there are still open issues around it. Another exception, which is the focus of this talk, is Arabic. Arabic, besides using a different alphabet, is written from right to left. This means that, and written and read from right to left. This means that this is completely mirrored to Latin languages. In order for reading Latin, for it to make sense, you have to write it in complete opposition. And as far as web pages go, simply mirroring text is not enough. You have to mirror everything. You have to mirror icons, you have to mirror field asterisks, you have to mirror form inputs, you have to mirror progress bars. So a multitude of UI changes were required to switch the direction of text and all of the UI elements. So just adding Arabic and the language did not make it understandable for somebody who speaks Arabic and expects a right to left website. So now we're going to go through just a little demo of our progress so far. This is not Arabic that you're seeing. This is English. I have cheated and added this English RTL translation, which is actually English, but is in RTL. I added this. This is an extra thing that I added for this presentation. So you can switch what direction the language that you are using is going to be displayed. So right here, If I go to the application, I'm going to see the website in left to right, and on the other side is going to be right to left. They're perfectly mirrored right now. So I'm going to log out. So we are going to be logged in as the same user. Maybe if this works. Okay. And we're going to go through just a couple of sample pages. So this is the reports page. It's not the most interesting one, but it has a lot of elements that needed switching. As you can see, everything is mirrored, even the little border here when you hover, and when you open, everything is completely mirrored. If you filter, the filter appears on the different side. The arrows are mirrored. The X's are mirrored. Everything has to be basically in complete opposition. If you want to submit a form, so this is how the People's tab looks like. The floating button is also mirrored. If you add a new person, everything is in reverse. Even typing text is like completely in complete opposition. And if I cancel, the pop-ups are in opposition, including the buttons. I'm not sure about this. This is just my assumptions. So for calendars also need to be mirrored. I have not mirrored this yet. So this is still a work in progress. And let me see, progress bars, for example. I have a progress bar that's in reverse. This is how the People's tab look like with the report filters, and we can see a contact that has a task and open the task, and you can see that everything is in complete reverse. That's about it. This is still a work in progress, as I said. To my awareness, we don't have any Arabic speakers in Medic, so this will go through some heavy testing by some external people very soon. And so the Arabic, I should show how the Arabic language looks like, actually. Let's go here, and I am going to be completely lost once this is clicked. I no longer understand things. So this is how this looks like in Arabic. A lot of the text is still English, because these are custom form fields which have not been translated. But you can see that all of the other main texts are in Arabic right now. So this is still a work in progress. We expect to deliver this maybe with the next CHT core release, or the next one. And this is done in conjunction with ICRC as a partnership to expand the reach of the CHT. Any questions, please? No, in Keto, it didn't need to. In Keto, just it has simple form inputs which responded to setting the browser direction to RTL. So there is some inherent browser support for RTL, which actually switches the text and the form inputs. Any other HTML elements in the UI stay where they are, and they need to be switched direction intentionally through CSS. But text automatically switches, and Enkidu respects the setting from the browser direction, fortunately.
Cool. Thanks, Diana. Any other questions? please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question or type it on chat. Okay, if there are no further questions, thanks everyone for making time to join this call. We hope to see you in our next call, which will be on February 13th. That's next month. And yeah, hope to see you in the next call. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Phil. Cheers, everybody.